Hello and welcome everyone. In this video, I wanted to talk to you about breakmasters. There are a lot of different configurations that need to be done in transportation management module in order for it to calculate estimated freight for the loads. One of those is a breakmaster. In this Microsoft Learn article, it briefly talks about how to configure a breakmaster based on the miles, but there are many other applications that we can use the breakmasters for. And in this video, we will be talking about several of those.
Let's begin the discovery of breakmasters by creating a rate master first. Rate masters are used to calculate an estimated freight rate. Navigate to Transportation Management, Rating, Rate Master. For the purposes of this demo, I will create a new rate master. I will call it P2P test. Each rate master would need to be assigned to rating metadata ID. The list of these IDs is defined when you initialize transportation management. For this demo, we will use P2P rating metadata. Now, before we can start creating rate-based assignments, we will need to create a new rate base. Rate base is used to define the rate itself, and that is where we can associate a breakmaster. So let's create a new one. We'll call it to_all P2P. Now, the breakmaster is a mandatory field, so each rate base would need to be assigned to one of those breakmasters. So what are the breakmasters used for? They're used to define different rates for different units. For example, these units can be miles, or weight, or volumetric weight, etc. We will start with the most basic scenario. We will use the breakmaster that is empty. And if we look at this breakmaster, we see that it has only one value, and this value is labeled as rate. It doesn't have any break unit, and we are only expected to enter a value in the rate field. Let's go back to our rate base. Once we assign that breakmaster empty, we will save the record, and we see that now the number of columns here has been adjusted. And we see the rate column right here. So let's create a new record. In here, because we named that rate base to all, we will try to set a broad range of zip codes for which this rate that we're about to define should be applicable. In this form, we're defining two zip codes. So in here, I will start with the lowest zip code in United States, 00210. And in here, I will enter the highest, 99995. Enter the drop-off country, USA. And in here, I will define the rate itself. I will enter $500. So this is a way for me to define a $500 rate for any range of US zip codes. With that being saved, we come back to the rate master form itself, and now we will use that rate base by creating a rate base assignment. In here, I will give it a name. Let's call it from all. In the rate base field, I will select the rate base I just created. Under service, I would select the truck service because that's a service that is provided by the carrier I'm planning to use. And in here, because I named it from all, I will define just a country USA. So basically, I'm saying that from any delivery made within the United States, this should be applicable. And now we'll save it. So we have defined the rate master. Now we need to associate that rate master with our shipping carrier. Navigate to the carriers, shipping carriers. For this demo, I will use Northwind carrier. I will delete the existing rate master right here. And under rating profile, I will click on new. I will give it a name. You can name it whatever you want. And here we will need to select the rate engine because we cannot select the rate master until after we select the rate engine. The list of rate engines is created when we initialize transportation management module. And because we are using the flat rate, I will start with the most basic rate engine called P2P contract. Let's select that. And then we can select the rate master that has the corresponding metadata ID associated with it. And let's scroll all the way to the bottom. And here's that P2P test rate master that we have created in the previous step. Let's select it and let's save the change. So now we have associated the rate master P2P test that has the $500 flat rate for all US deliveries to our shipping carrier. And now it's time to test it on the load. I will duplicate that tab, open the list of all the loads, click on Rate Route Workbench, weight and volumes are 0, and I'm going to click on rate shop. Right away I see that the carrier Northwind with its carrier service track has been recommended as the valid option, and the rate here is $500. Now if I change the weight here, for example, to 200 pounds and do the rate shop, you see that the rate does not change because this flat rate is independent of the weight or volumetric weight of the load. But what if I want to make that rate based on the weight of my load? We can try to do that by adjusting our rate base for our rate master. So let's go back to our shipping carrier. Let's select that P2P test rate master. Let's go back to the rate base. And in here, I want to change my rate master from empty to the one that says weight. But before I do that, I need to clear my search area right here. The only way to do that is to delete details section right here, refresh it, and then my search criteria disappears. And now I can change my brake master to weight. Let's take a closer look at the weight brake master. It has multiple brakes based on the weight, and each of those brakes are labeled as LBS, so pounds. So what it gives me an idea of that I can have a different rate per pound. I'll then go back and click on new. And in here, I will define a broad range of the destination zip codes. The country will be USA. And if we scroll to the right, we see multiple brakes for 1 pound, 5 pounds, 20, 100 and 1000 pounds, for which I can define a different rate per pound. So what I'm going to do here is define the high rate for any loads that are, let's say, under 1 pound, so $5 per pound. Then I will define a $4 per pound for any loads that are between 5 and 1, and then down the list 3, 2, and 1. So now I have different rate per pound based on the total weight of that load. Let's try to use 3 pounds, for example, and let's set the weight for our load to 3 pounds. Let's go back to our rate route workbench. Let me change the weight data right here to 3, and let me click on the rate shop. You see that the rate was calculated as $5. If we scroll under view details, we see the units that were used was 1 unit, and the rate for that unit was $5. If we go back to our rate base, we see that corresponds to the first value in our rate base. Just to prove it, I can change it, for example, to $7. Save that change, go back to my rating, and then do the rate shop again. You see that the rate has adjusted to 7. But the weight that I have specified was 3 pounds. Why was that rate used and not this rate? Because that's the rate that should be applicable for any load that are between 5 and 1 pound. To give an answer to that question, we need to understand what rating engine have we used for that carrier. So let's go back to our shipping carrier, and we can see that the rate engine we have used is a P2P contract. For the system to consider weight during the rating and routing exercise, we need to select a different engine. And remember, all these engines are pre-configured. I will use a different rate engine instead. I will use a P2P weight. Let's go back to our rate master, and let's go back to see the rate base. So now with an engine changed to P2P weight, I expect the system to then respect the weight of a load, to then use the right rate per pound in here based on the number of pounds. So if we go back to our rate route workbench and click on the rate shop, we see that the rate has been recalculated as $12. That is $4 per pound times 3 pounds itself. And now if we, for example, increase our load weight to a number, let's say between 20 and 5 pounds, let's say to 15, we now would expect to see a rate per pound of $3. Type in 15 and do the rate shop. So 15 times 3, we have a rate of $35. So that is a way to configure the system to drive the rating of a load based on the number of pounds and a different rate for each range. We can go further, and then we can decide what about if we want to use volumetric weight instead. Let's go back to our rate master, click on the rate base, and then we can say, all right, I see that we have this volume right here. Can we use that brake master instead? Sure, let's try that. Let's delete the details again. Let's change it to the volume, and let's click on new. And here we need to define the range of zip codes, so very similar to what we've done before. Drop off country USA. And now we see that we can define a rate for each of the 3 brakes on the volumetric weight. Under 100, under 200, and under 300. Let's use, for example, 30 for any weight under 100, 20 under 200, and then 10 under 300. And let's go back to our rating workbench and click on the rate shop. We see the rate that was calculated is for $150, and that is 15 pounds multiplied by 30. But in the volumetric weight, volume also matters. What if we set up a higher volume here? Let's set up a very large number, let's say 3,000, and do the rate chop again. We see the rate is not adjusted based on the volume. So for us to configure the system, we also have to make sure that the rating engine actually works together with our rate base, right? So if we want to use volume and weight in calculations, we need to go back to the shipping carrier and change one of those standard rate engines to the P2P volume weight. Also, please note that the volume factor here is 0.9. That means we're going to multiply the volume of our load by a factor of 0.9 to get our volumetric weight. And then we will compare it to the actual weight and pick the higher value. So what about if we use, for example, 200 weight and then 200 volume? Do the rate chop. So in this case, the rate that was used is 10, right? Because the volumetric weight is between 300 and 200 of a unit. All right, what about if I change it to a number that is 100, for example, and do the rate chop? You see, in this case, the volume was actually used instead. The system multiplied 200, which is our volume, by a factor of 0.9 to get 180. 180 is larger than 100, so it's using volumetric weight of 180 instead of the actual weight of 100. And then it decides on the rate. So for value of 180, it falls in between 200 and 100, so the rate of 20 was used. So 180 times 20, that is why we get a number of 3,600. All right, so this is another example where in order for our brake master to work properly, we need to make sure that the corresponding rate engine is assigned. Let's see how we can drive different rates if we are using miles as they are brake masters. So what I'll do first is go and open my rate master. I will click on the rate base. I will delete this detail section right here and then change my brake master to mileage. Then click on new right here, enter the range of zip codes. And right here, you see that I can define different rates per mile. So for example, for any number of miles lower than 3, I will use the rate of 9. For any number of miles between 6 and 3, I will use rate of 6 and then 3 right here. So just reverse the order here. So as the number of miles grows, the rate per mile actually decreases. And now what we also do is really change my rate engine to P2P mileage. Now let's go back to our rating workbench, click on the rate chop, and we see that we have a number of miles as 5. Then we need to decide on the rate per mile. We expect a rate to be $6 per mile. But we see a different number here. We see 45. The system actually used this rate instead of this rate. So the system just used the first rate. Just to confirm that, we can change the first rate to $10 per mile, save that change, and then do the rate chop again. And we see that the rate has adjusted to 50. 5 miles times $10 per mile. So why exactly did the system not use this rate as it did for the weight or volumetric weight? The reason being here, that's just the way this rating engine is configured. Let's go back to our carrier. This P2P mileage engine is configured to use only the first rate, so it will not work with different rates per mile. So you have to configure it the same way you would configure a P2P contract, which is just defining one rate per mile, and it will remain the same regardless of a number of miles that is calculated for any given load. So if we want to define a different rate per mile, we will need to use a different rating engine instead. We will use that misspelled mileage engine right here. And for this, I already have a rate master. It's NW mileage, and I'll just show you how it is already set up. Right here, I have defined the origin postal code, range of destination postal codes, and if I click on the rate base, here's my rate. So let's say my 9, 6, and 3. So now with these numbers in place, let's see how we can recalculate the rate for our load. Let's go back here, click on the rate chop. We see the rate is calculated as $30. That is because we have 5 miles, which is still the same, multiplied by $6 per mile, because the number of miles is 5, that falls in within that range. Just to test it, we can, for example, change the number of miles to 7 and expect $3 per mile to be used. Let's do that. If we go and open mileage engine, that is where we define a number of miles. Select this record right here and enter 7 as the number of miles. Save that. So now we expect the rate to be 7 miles multiplied by the rate per mile, which is 3. And that's exactly what we get. So just to conclude, I think it's very important when you configure your carriers to make sure that the rating engine works in line with the rate base and its brake masters, because you may have very unexpected results if that is not the case. So both have to be aligned. And the brake master on its own is nothing but a labeling system for the user to make sure that they're entering the right rates for the right values for the right ranges. So the brake unit right here is really just a labeling. It has nothing to do with an actual parameter that will be used. For example, we could have configured the mileage to say not miles but kilometers. It still does not change the fact that it will go to the mileage engine and will use the number of miles when it's calculating the rate.
That is all for now. I hope you enjoyed it. Until the next time, take care.